Anna Whitmore lived on Maple Hollow Lane, a quiet street tucked into the hills outside Asheville, North Carolina. Her home, a two-story colonial with blue shutters and a wraparound porch, had been her world for 15 years. She had moved in as a newlywed, carried over the threshold by her husband Paul, their future unwritten and full of plans. Back then, they made pancakes on Sundays, fell asleep on the couch watching movies, and dreamed about backpacking through Europe, mapping routes over wine-stained paper napkins. They used to talk for hours about what their children might look like, which city they'd retire in, and what color they'd paint the bedroom walls in every decade of their lives. There was a time when Anna had believed, with youthful certainty, that love would always be that simple. Now, at 41, Anna's mornings were composed of muscle memory, the hiss of the kettle, the cat brushing her ankles, and the sound of her daughter Clara's alarm going off upstairs. Breakfast at 7 o'clock, drop-off at 7:45, followed by a walk through the garden or a stop at the bakery for fresh bread. She taught art part-time at the community college and organized the annual spring arts fair. Her students adored her gentle encouragement and the way she could see beauty in even the clumsiest sketches. But even the canvas had begun to feel like routine, like something she performed rather than inhabited, each stroke more practiced than passionate. Even the smell of paint no longer stirred inspiration, but memory. Paul worked in medical equipment sales, a field that required constant travel and an endless rotation of conference calls and client dinners. He had once been animated, curious about books, and thoughtful in the way he'd fold her bath towel into a swan just to make her laugh. Now his voice was often measured, his hugs perfunctory. Anna couldn't remember the last time he held her for no reason or brushed the hair from her face just because. They still slept in the same bed, but the space between them felt like a continent, unspoken, expanding. The kind of distance that doesn't start with a fight, but with forgetting. Their house was filled with relics of the life they'd built, framed photos, pressed flowers, and shelves lined with novels they'd once read aloud to each other. But it all felt preserved, like a museum exhibit of a marriage. Clara, now 16, kept her headphones in more often than not, and was often lost in her own world of school, social media, and college brochures. Anna told herself that was normal, that growing apart was part of growing up, but it didn't make the silence easier. She had begun to feel like a ghost in her own home, present, functional, and invisible. Sometimes she'd walk into a room and forget why she entered it. Other times she would stand in front of the mirror in the morning and barely register the woman staring back, her soft lines, the faint crow's feet that had arrived quietly, like shadows that only appear in certain light. One particularly low afternoon, Anna found herself in the attic sorting through old moving boxes. She came across a sketch pad from her 20s. Inside were watercolors of train stations, street cafes, and laughing strangers in soft pencil lines. She touched the pages with reverence, feeling a jolt of something close to grief. One morning in late April, as Anna trimmed back the ivy climbing the fence, she saw a moving truck pull into the long empty house next door. By afternoon, a woman in her 30s emerged with a clipboard and 2 boys in tow. They were boisterous, their voices rising like sparrows. Later that day, the woman introduced herself, Rachel Lindstrom, recently divorced, moving back to her hometown. The boys were Evan and Leo, aged 10 and 7. Anna brought over a pie as a welcome. Rachel invited her in. The house smelled of cardboard, dust, and fresh paint. The boys raced up and down the stairs, their laughter echoing through the open rooms. Rachel seemed equal parts frazzled and grateful. Over the next few days, they chatted more, over fences, while collecting mail, during trash day. Rachel was warm, sarcastic, and funny in a way that caught Anna off guard. She had this easy way of saying exactly what she meant without dressing it up for approval. One Saturday, Rachel invited Anna in for coffee while the boys were at their father's. They sat at the kitchen island, sunlight flooding the counters. They talked about schools, the pain of watching a marriage decay, and the awkward rhythm of starting over. Rachel said, "It's like waking up after surgery, foggy, sore, but suddenly aware that something's missing, and something else might finally heal." Anna laughed, then teared up without meaning to. "I'm not divorced," she said, "but some days it feels like we live in parallel dimensions. I don't know the last time Paul asked me how I was, and meant it." Rachel didn't pity her. She just listened, nodding slowly. "I know that kind of silence. It's heavy. It makes you forget you used to be someone else." Over the following weeks, the women grew closer. Not in the way small-town gossips might suggest, but in the way two people do when they meet at the exact moment they need someone to really see them. They went on long evening walks. They shared playlists. Rachel introduced Anna to indie folk songs that made her cry unexpectedly while folding laundry. They sat in Anna's garden drinking wine while the cicadas droned in the trees. They spoke in half sentences and shared silences that didn't feel empty. Sometimes Anna would find herself thinking of Rachel while doing mundane things, scrubbing the sink, braiding Clara's hair. Not in a romantic way, but in a way that made her feel witnessed. They laughed more, and one afternoon, Rachel taught Anna how to drive a stick shift in an empty parking lot, just because she could. They screamed when the car stalled. Anna hadn't laughed that hard in years. Paul noticed the change. One evening, he asked, "You've been seeing a lot of Rachel. Everything okay?" Anna hesitated. "It's the first time in a while I've felt awake, that's all." He blinked, unsure of what to say. He didn't ask for more. Clara, meanwhile, adored Rachel. She said things like, "She gets it, you know," after coming home from walks with Rachel and her sons. Anna didn't know what Rachel had said, but she was grateful. It was nice to see Clara smile more. One particularly humid evening, the air thick and trembling with storm tension, Rachel and Anna sat on Anna's porch while thunder rolled in the distance. Rain eventually swept across the neighborhood, warm and persistent. They moved inside, lit candles, and let the conversation drift to things long buried, ambitions, griefs, and the slow erosion of self. Rachel said, "You can love someone and still lose yourself inside that love." Anna whispered, "That's what I'm afraid has happened." They sat in silence, the storm rattling the windows. It felt like something old breaking apart inside Anna, something she hadn't named but had carried for years. Her shoulders shook slightly, but she didn't cry. Instead, she looked out at the rain and breathed as if for the first time in months. No lines were crossed, no confessions were made, but something shifted. In the days after, Anna began to change in ways both small and seismic. She signed up for a ceramics class she'd talked herself out of for years. She began waking early just to sit alone and paint. She dug out her camera and took photos of rain on windows, of Clara's laughter, of the way the garden bloomed wild under her care. She stopped apologizing for wanting something more. She journaled again, at first awkwardly, like writing to a stranger, but the pages grew more honest with each day. She wrote about being 19, about how she once thought her whole life would be art galleries, train rides, and handwritten letters. She wrote about how it all narrowed down to routines, and how maybe that wasn't failure, just neglect. Paul watched with curiosity. He began making more of an effort, showing up early, cooking one night a week, sitting through an entire conversation without checking his phone. They weren't suddenly fixed, but for the first time in years, they were talking again, laughing sometimes, touching cautiously. There were nights when they stood at the sink together, washing and drying dishes, and it didn't feel like a performance. It felt like a beginning. One night, Anna asked him quietly, "Do you think we're happy?" Paul looked at her, startled. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe we just forgot how to be." That night, they sat up late, talking like people who remembered how. It wasn't dramatic, but it was honest. Anna didn't see Rachel every day anymore. Their connection had settled into something solid, unspoken, and real. One afternoon, Anna found a small wrapped package on her porch, a handmade mug glazed in soft ocean tones. Inside was a note, "For morning moments that belong only to you." Anna held it close. She poured her coffee the next morning, sat on the porch, and watched the mist rise from the hills. She breathed. It wasn't a dramatic ending, but it was a beginning, a real one, for herself.